I'd like to call the meeting of the Manchester Select Board to order. The first item on the agenda is comment from anyone from the public on items that are not on the agenda. Actually, before I do that, I probably should call a meeting to order and get people to say that they're here. John Round.
Here.
Becky Jakes.
Yes, here.
Kathy Bellata.
Here.
Brian Solacey.
Here.
That the entire board being present, we will move to comments on subjects not on the agenda. Okay,
Yeah, not seeing any.
I don't see any hands and I don't see anyone. Well, there's someone connecting to audio. Okay. The next is to go over the items on our list of the to-do list. Let's see if I can get my agenda up. Kathy, could you go over the list of things that we're supposed to be doing?
Sure. So it looks as though the open meeting agenda was an action. I'm not sure I see it on the agenda for discussion tonight, so
Right.
we may need to put that on the next meeting's agenda formally, Greg, unless there's something in particular you want to go over tonight.
No, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, next
So-
meeting will be fine.
I think we're discussing the facilities master plan, speeding issues, parking, flagpole, everything else that's here. It looks like it's on the agenda for this evening, except, are we getting a pickleball update?
So I just have it as part of my
Okay.
report. There's not a lot of new news, so.
So I think we're good on the actions for tonight, with the exception of the open meeting agenda. If we're gonna have an open meeting for public feedback, we probably need to discuss what that should be. And, I'm sorry.
I have one thing that I think we've got on the agenda for the September 18th that isn't on here, which is further discussion about the water rates.
Yes.
So
That's
that
missing from
should
the
go
action
on
item
the-
list, yeah.
Yep.
I agree, that should be on there. And if I may add, Ann, just a question, and Greg, maybe you can provide some information on this. The Powderhouse Hill question, which I think you had sent in your comments maybe a month ago, sent some comments to the Housing Authority. And I'm not sure where that stands. Should that belong on this action item thing, or is that going to be addressed as you see fit based on your comments?
Well, probably will need to go on, given the slow response here.
Do you want to add it to the
Okay.
action item list for a later update?
Yes.
Okay.
We can put it as a placeholder, like a couple of months out if you want.
Yeah, I'd probably do it sooner than that. I'd probably do it.
The 18th?
By the 18th.
Fine.
And regarding the action item on the proposed Human Rights and Inclusion Committee, I'll take the action to check with Susan on where we are with the process for setting up new committees, what that entails, so I'll take that action.
And take my name off now. I've got no responsibility here whatsoever.
Okay, there is no chairman's report. We've done the action items. So the next is interviews for the library trustee. Leslie Beatty. Is Leslie Beatty here?
We have both library, yes.
Okay. In that case, please, explain why you want to be on a trustee of the library, and if you would?
Okay. I know, it's hard to know whether
You know
you're
what,
facing this
if you
way.
wanna move your chairs to the side, that might be a little easier for you. It is a little awkward having,
Kind of
yeah,
like here.
yeah, that's,
Sure.
that's just right there is fine. That way you can look both ways.
Okay.
Can we sit over here?
Yeah.
Wherever you want.
That
Feels
would be
official.
easier. Yeah. I have no aspirations for running for select board though.
Sure, you can go ahead and sit.
Okay.
That's fine.
More comfortable.
Anne, if I may,
Certainly.
typically what we do, when we're doing this, Leslie and Sarah, is we just ask people to say a little bit about how they would fit with the board or committee, and then we ask a few questions. More than anything, we are so grateful to anyone and everyone who steps forward. And it's never an easy thing when we have more than one person, but it's always actually great, because then we always have lots of other areas people can volunteer in. But we've all sat where you do, so we understand it. Thank you. So Leslie, go ahead.
Please
Well, the reason
introduce yourself.
Oh, go ahead. If you want me to go ahead and start.
Yes, she said, go ahead and introduce
Okay.
yourself. I know.
So little did I know when I first took my high school part-time job in a public library that it would lead to a career as a researcher and a consultant and a writer and full-fledged librarian. Certainly, you know that after I took the part-time position in high school, I earned a master's degree in information science and put into work in all sorts of ways, not just kind of the going right into a position at the library, but even after 15 years of being a librarian at a private school in Dallas, I've come to understand various aspects of what a library should look like. One that is there for a whole community and in a sense working as a community center. One that represents lots of groups of people with varying degrees of perspectives. One that where people can gather, where they can learn, where they can feel comfortable no matter what they're reading, no matter who they are. And certainly during the summers that we weren't living here full-time, or during the summers that we were just here full-time before we moved here, I was already volunteering in the library right next door, and getting to know all the people who make the library work, and I've continued to do so since we moved here full-time 8 years ago.
Thank you.
Thank you. John, do you have any questions?
Yeah, Leslie, I don't know if I should assume that you have probably spoken with Rick and with David, who are the two current trustees, but what's your perspective on what the biggest challenge that the library has right now to face that the trustees are going to have to deal with?
Okay, well, I think everybody knows that there's a physical space constraint, and then the challenge is how to continue to maintain the excitement of the programs that they offer, but also how to expand those programs, and then to use most effectively what the library already has in terms of databases, in terms of great employees and staff, and, and then just kind of keeping it going. Perhaps also the challenges would be to find other ways to reach out to the community.
Okay. So it's both operational and kind of developmental, strategic. All of these are, well, maybe they're all number one, I don't know, but they're all important considerations. Well, I thank you very much for raising your hand to volunteer for this. It's a very important position, and we're very happy and grateful that that there are people out there like you who
Thank you.
raise their hand to do stuff like this. So thank you.
Kathy?
Yes, John, I had a couple of questions and John took one of them. So you mentioned some of the challenges. What are the opportunities, areas of improvement that you see for the library? That's one question.
Some of the opportunities are again kind of what I raised the last time in terms of being able to offer different services, perhaps coming up with other resources. Maybe we're missing some ways to bring other people in, or even take out, bring some of the staff out to various parts of the community that aren't able to get there themselves or can't read. We don't offer at this point any kind of Braille information, so that's an opportunity. I think there's opportunities to make sure that the public knows that we are an unprejudicial organization, that the library serves ALA standards, American Library Association standards, keeps a balanced collection, and fights for being able to represent whatever groups need them.
Thank you. I think you answered my second question, which was gonna be your thoughts on the book bans that we see in other parts of the
Good
country. Could
question.
you elaborate on that?
Certainly, it seems like we're hearing more and more about them. So while I was a librarian in Dallas, I did have a challenge on one of the books that I had purchased for the middle school library, which there is 5th through 8th grade. And I remember 2 moms coming up and putting a book on in front of me and saying, you know, why do you have this book in the library? And before I answered that, I wanted to find out, you know, what was it about the book that bothered them? And it turns out that a daughter of one of the 2 women had picked it up, looked at the inside cover to find out what it was about, and it was about a lesbian love story. And I said, okay, you know, your daughter picked this book up for a reason. Tell me what the issue was. And she said, well, you know, my daughter didn't understand what she was picking up. And she came to me to help understand what the book was about. And I said, well, isn't that what she was supposed to do? Didn't that start a conversation? And to me, first of all, representing people who really are out there, and what could be better than having a conversation with your mother about something that they don't know enough about. So again, you know, being one that looks for fairness in all sorts of situations, I thought that as a really good example of what books should do and what parents can do about letting their kids read what they want to read, I guess.
Thank you very much.
Becky?
Some great questions, I love it, and also interesting answers. Not as meaty a topic, but do you have any time constraints?
So David had asked me that as well, and I said that I did have some volunteer commitments, but that certainly as somebody being on an important board like this, that I would make the time, and that I'm not shy about volunteering to take on responsibility, and that if I end up being chosen for this interim term, that I would like to continue that commitment as well.
Thank you.
Ryan?
Everyone stole my questions. Good enough. But very insightful answers to them, by the way. Thank you.
You mentioned the constraints of space. Do you have any thoughts about, how to approach that problem?
Okay, I'm sorry, Anne, I mentioned something about the physical space and what?
Do you have any thoughts about how to approach that problem?
Okay, can
The
you,
physical constraints of the space,
Uh,
the actual physical constraints you
So-
mentioned.
so I know that both the building and the board, the library trustees have had to deal with leaks in the building, the fact that there's really no more space in terms of growing the collection that we know right now. And I know also that, that all of the people concerned are looking to expand that space, whether it's for book club meetings, more community space, more children's space, more junior high and teen space. But I think all of that would be very welcome.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Not entirely.
Okay.
What, do you have a feeling about whether it would be better to have, a second building elsewhere or try to expand, the current building? People have talked about going down.
Right.
Do you
So
have any thoughts
I
on
would,
that?
I don't know that I would be willing to give up the iconic library building that we have right now. I think there's so many intriguing parts of the actual building that I would not want to give up. And that's what makes, I think, the Manchester Library pretty special. I could see expanding the physical part of the library, as I said, to accommodate various other constituencies. And I think there may be room and certainly has been talk about doing so. But there's a vitality and a mix of ages that I would like to see being continued. And I'd hate to give all of that up.
I guess, what I'm looking for is ideas about using other space, like there's the community center, which, might be a place to have, book group meetings,
So,
or, go ahead.
yeah, no, I like that idea and I've thought about that as well. And I'd like to, perhaps use the community center as an adjunct library at times, but not all the time, only because I think, again, that the library building itself is a way for people to feel secure, and know that they're gonna be well served. And I know that for teens and for kids, they've used the community center quite a bit, and that seems to have worked, but I also see the main building as being something that people would feel that it's a friendly place to gather.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Actually, I do.
ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Consider this naive, and I spoke with David about this a couple of months ago. Where do you see the future of libraries
I'm sorry?
The future of libraries. I mean, with everything that's going on the internet, everything that's available online, as far as resources,
That's a great question.
and,
Yeah.
I mean, so the question I have is, are we looking to expand
And see it
and see
diminish.
it diminish, okay?
So,
I see
I
it
don't
as
see-
reading rooms, but as far as a
So,
book repository.
Okay, so maybe I was brought up in the land of, or the time of print, and I don't ever see that as going away. I know there had been some libraries, certainly school libraries at private schools, who pretty much took out their whole print collection and put in all sorts of databases and things like that, thinking, okay, you know, this is what students need, and then gradually having the print collection make its way back in. There's a tactile feel about that even babies need. That if you didn't have the books for them to both look at the pictures without screens, and to be able to feel and even chew, that they would miss out something.
I still read my
I
grandkids'
do,
books.
and you bring up something important as well, Brian, in terms of, okay, what is the future? And part of another service that I'd like to see is to teach more people about how to use the databases that we already have. All the other resources that are kind of tucked away behind the library screen, as we, so to
So
speak.
do away with teaching Dewey Decimal System and teaching how to use the database instead.
So,
Okay, thank you.
so, okay.
Once again, anyone, is there anything else you would like to say? Leslie?
Yes, please. So a couple things is, well, I have a question for you, David, and one of them has to do with, are you specifically looking for a trustee to take the secretary's position?
Oh, well, you all should know that the secretary that we had, Dean Kadanis, had to leave the board. So I am officially the treasurer,
Okay,
we have a chairman, and we
okay.
have no secretary.
Okay,
So
well,
Dave
that's my
Lumsden-
answer then.
Dave Lumsden, well, Dave Lumsden is functioning as the treasurer and the secretary. However, we haven't actually voted for positions
Right.
for over a year. And I think that once we get a new trustee, we should have an election, because I may not want to be secretary forever and ever more.
Okay, I was just curious about that, whether you had already slotted that position in as part of what the new trustee will be doing.
We haven't decided, and
Okay.
there's no real
Okay.
strong feelings about it
Yeah.
right now.
That's fair. And I guess, I think we're all pretty much the same age, and so I want to just, thank you for your considering me, but also leaving you with kind of a little humor, and want to say apologies to Joni Mitchell and just say, I've seen both sides of the checkout desk now. So, anyway, hopefully I've answered all of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is Sarah Davis present?
Yes. Sitting at the desk.
Can you see me?
Okay.
What is it?
I don't know. Okay,
Yes.
I'm in the frame. Does this work?
Okay, yes, would you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. I'm Sarah Davis. I have lived in town for 2.5 years. Before that, I lived in Beverly Farms, about 2 minutes from where I live right now. Lived there for 5.5 years. I'm an attorney. I work at Ropes and Gray. I'm a mergers and acquisitions lawyer. I have 2 small children. I have a 6-year-old who's going into 1st grade shortly at Memorial, and a 3-year-old who's in nursery school. And I've been looking for ways to get involved in the community. I feel like I'm just kind of coming out from under the like complete stress of all of the things I just mentioned and COVID and so and even just honestly like getting out and learning about the different resources in Manchester because when COVID hit, I had a 3-year-old and my son was born February 2020 and it was like we were just like not really going anywhere. So when we finally like got settled and going out to different parts of the town and like going to the library and spending time there, like especially on the weekends, that's when I spend a lot of time with my kids to try to do things with them, kind of by myself because my husband does a lot during the week. And have just really enjoyed, going and taking them and getting them, interested in reading. Always read to them a lot, but the idea that they can pick out their own books is always very exciting, and I try not to, comment if my daughter picks like all the Barbie or unicorn books, and that's her choice, and it's been really fun to watch, and they love the space. I mean, frankly, I'm surprised you guys let me do this because I think they terrorize the space a little bit. But I think I've enjoyed going when there are different events going on, and I think the programming, both in person and online, seems really great. I have only done a little bit of the in person, but I think it's really important to have like good sources of information, as we just talked about, because there's so much out there, and I think like for kids especially, they're not used to kind of thinking of maybe like one authoritative source. They're just like Googling, and they're not, engaging with what might be, real like knowledge and not just, words you can find wherever. And so like a program, like I saw there was something on like zero waste, like I'm trying to teach my daughter about like recycling and things like that, and to go and sit with her together and to like hear someone knowledgeable talk about it, like she's very curious and she's excited, and I just want to so I think one of the big reasons I'm interested in getting involved is from that angle, I would like to support that function of the library, but also I realize it's many things to many people. I like the idea of a place for people from all over town to get together. I feel like it's kind of a hard town to get to know different people that you don't just naturally see all the time, and you quickly are like, oh, where do your children go to school? Are you, do you belong to this club? And it's kind of like, I don't know, as much as I was like, oh, this is so exciting, I don't know anybody. Now I live here for a couple of years and I'm like, okay, I know the same people. I'd like to get to know some people that I don't, meet because of, neighbors or parents or things like that. And I think like also for maybe the older community, access to technology would be really important. And I mean, there's so much to navigate now. I can't imagine that someone who's not very, technologically literate would want to use like the new AI tools, but all of that stuff, it's just like, it's changing so quickly. Like that kind of came out of nowhere and it's impacting so many things. And, I think having people trained to help people in the community learn how to use those tools, because who knows, like all of a sudden, like I actually have a pro bono client now where we're trying to change his name in Puerto Rico for various reasons. But anyway, we need him to copy his ID and all this documentation, and he doesn't have any idea of how to do any of this, and we suggested he go to his local library and make copies. And we actually called him and we said like, hey, here's the situation. He's completely intimidated. If he showed up, would you help him make copies? And this was in Lynn. And whoever he got basically said, well, we can show him how to use it once. And we were like, really? You're gonna be like standing there and can't like help him copy 5 documents so he can solve this like very debilitating, I don't have an identification issue, but anyway. So I just enjoy, I think it's very important that it accomplishes a lot of things. I mean, it's frankly pretty intimidating, but that's kind of who I am and why I'm interested.
Thank you. Becky, do you have any questions?
I do, and my question is time constraints. As we all understand parenting and working and how if you have the time to be able to, and I
No, tell them, but we're in the woods.
Oh, good. I was wondering.
Anyway, sorry about that. Just if you, I don't know what the time is, yeah, David could explain that, but if you have time to devote to that.
Since I've been on the board, we've changed our meeting dates and times periodically. We're flexible. I'm retired. Rick has some flexibility in his schedule. So frankly, it's kind of a non-issue. We could hold the meetings at night. We could hold the meetings during the day, as we've done in the last couple of years. They've been daytime, weekday meetings. But as long as it doesn't conflict with our other responsibilities at night, I don't see why there would be any holdup, any restrictions about a particular time or a day of the week that we meet. Does that answer your question?
It's more of she,
Well, both of you.
Yeah.
I mean, Leslie's busy too, so.
right.
So to answer your question, yes, we probably could accommodate a young parent who's busy with kids, and we have that flexibility.
I guess I'm less asking, I'm not asking you to answer what I asked Sarah, but more what you all expect of whomever would be
Oh,
a member.
How many hours per week or month,
Mhm.
or what's the expected
What's the
workload?
investment, I guess?
What's the
I
investment
see what
time?
you mean.
And then
Well,
Sarah can answer whether or not she
Right.
can make that commitment.
That's a very important question, and that question has a lot to do with the trustee's recommendation. This committee is too small, frankly. We only have 3 people on the committee. For us to have an informal meeting, as Greg knows, we have to post a meeting for 2 of us to gather together to
Yeah.
discuss anything. I think the committee should be expanded because we have very ambitious plans. We really do plan to expand that library, keep the existing architectural wonder that it is, and move that and acquire properties out the back, which are privately owned. That's a very ambitious task. We have to raise money, we have to get the approval of the town voters, and we have to get the approval of the property owners. That is quite a task for the trustees in the future. I don't know whether this fully answers your question, but these are significant responsibilities. And the new trustee will be facing those responsibilities, and it's not going to be an easy task, as I can see from your faces.
Thank you.
Brian?
I mean,
Becky, do you have anything more?
Yes, I'm just gonna wait for Sarah to now
Yeah.
answer.
I think, it would be an issue if all the meetings were during weekdays, because, which sounds like they're not, because I do work full-time, and in Boston, it used to be 3, but now they're making it 4, but not on Fridays. And, I'm home pretty much early evening every night, so, I take the train, so that is it truly happens. I'm very motivated to get out the door. And then, other than that, I have a lot of energy. I stay pretty busy. I don't think I would do what I do if I didn't kind of like to be very engaged. And, as long as the kind of work that people might be doing independently can kind of be done whenever, wherever, then I don't really see the working, being an issue. And
So, in short, yes, you could do it. So, thank you. I'm all done, Ann.
Anything else? Okay, Brian?
The same question relative to your vision of where a library is gonna be in 25 years.
25 years.
20 years.
2.
I don't even know.
I was
Yeah.
looking, do you envision brick and mortar?
Yeah,
building?
yeah, I do. I think,
Obviously Dave does. He's building,
Yeah.
we're going.
I do, and then some, and then a lot.
yeah. I almost wonder in some ways if we're just gonna hit a point well, it sounds like at that library you were talking about, they went from digital back to print, that people, was that this, or some more print than they had, yeah. I think in some ways you're starting to see almost like pulling back on over everything, like being over technology reliant. Like I know there's like a movement of like, I think they're called like Luddite teenagers that don't have phones and they take out books from the library, and sometimes I'm hopeful that like, you know, my kids will go in the other direction instead of like me on my smartphone too much when I'm around them. But so, you know, I guess who knows, but I hope so. I would think in a, especially in a, you know, a smaller community like Manchester, where, you know, a lot of residents either live here a long time or, you know, go to school and come back and raise their families, they will probably be sort of instilling in people that this was important to me for these reasons. And like I have a lot of, I grew up in Duxbury, which is, I know, blasphemous that I live on the North Shore. But when I was younger, we actually, I was, you know, maybe like 12 when they opened a new library. And similarly, it was in a very old historic building that was beautiful in the center of town. But I remember being there, and they had brought in like people in wheelchairs just to show how they could not get around, and like they were, you know, trying to raise awareness. And anyway, they ended up buying, or they ended up repurposing a school building. But I guess that's all to say. You know, in 25 years, it's not like all the people who are here today are going to go away. And I think there's to a certain extent like a little bit of carrying it forward all along the way that I would hope, you know, keeps the physical print, the physical place, the print still relevant. Though I definitely think people are going to be looking to libraries to understand the things like the AI and like, because who knows when those things become more mainstream, how they'll be used. I mean, even in my practice, I was kind of ignoring all of that stuff, and then it was like, oh, well, here's this new contract drafting defined term, and I was like, oh, wait a minute, I have to actually understand what these things mean and how they're going to change.
Good luck with you.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, I think it would be important for the library to kind of stay ahead of those trends as well, so they can help educate everyone.
Thank you.
Can I get a little pitch in briefly? Brian and I have talked extensively
Certainly.
about how libraries are changing for the future, in our opinion. And the trustees feel that libraries of the future will be more like community centers, community hubs, in which activities are centered around the library, not just reading books, but holding meetings, being archives, being social centers for the library. And we're in an ideal situation, I think, in the future with the expansion right around Town Hall, that library building, this little nucleus right here, where the new focus of the future Manchester could be away from Crosby's and Ridgedale's and that commercial section and that lowland area, and more in this direction. And I think we're heading that way, and
Kind of
it'll
referring
accelerate.
to maybe is more like this would be the information center.
Right, and the social center, a gathering spot for
Well,
meetings,
I already see that, I already see the libraries being that.
but we need room for those meetings.
So we're a little crunched for time, so we're just
Kathy?
gonna keep moving
Yeah,
along.
just,
Yes, Kathy?
I'd like to hear Sarah's thoughts again on the book bans and what you believe, based on your experience using the library, what are its biggest challenges and opportunities, starting with the book bans.
Yeah, I think the book bans topic is very challenging. You know, I feel like that question is very hard for schools, especially because there's only so much you can do. I would hope that in the library setting, you know, that could be a place. I mean, certainly when you're not old enough to check out books, there's only so much you can do. But you know, to be a more empowering resource whenever a child is old enough to get their library card and make their own choices. You can't stop parents from looking at what they're reading and commenting, but you know, I think it's important for the catalog to remain, you know, as diverse as possible. And I mean, even whether it's, I mean, there's some historic stuff that people are having a problem with all the way back to Shakespeare or newer material, that everything stays in place as much as, you know, the community allows, which I hope that it would, so that people can make their own, children can make their own choices.
And what
Thank
about
you.
challenges versus opportunities?
Well, it does sound like the space is the challenge, coming up. I would just imagine, you know, all the things you have to navigate, the property, the grants, the approvals. I think that's a big challenge. I mean, I think that's not really my area, but I kind of like project management. I'm a transactional lawyer, you know, seeing companies make agreements from beginning to end and just kind of working together and seeing something from start to finish. So I think that is there's certainly the near-term priority of this library. And I think opportunities would similarly be focused on, you know, the idea of being like a meeting space. I think after, not to go back to COVID, but after COVID, people are looking for ways to get together in person in a lot of different areas. And, you know, I think whatever age group it is, and I hope to see that continue versus a lot of Zooms.
Thank you. Kathy, do you have anything else?
Nope.
John?
Yes, and thank you, Sarah, for raising your hand. I have just one question. You're you're at a different point in life than most of the other folks on a lot of these committees, certainly on the library trustee. Don't take that personally, Rick or Dave. But as a result, you have perhaps different opinions or perspectives on what you can bring to the library trustee position because of where you are. And I think I'm interested in, you know, in a short response on what you think that is.
Well, not to keep saying the same thing, but the role for children, I think, is just particularly interesting to me, from, you know, the young chewing on books phase to the, you know, high school age. And I think those different initiatives there would be particularly interesting to me. I think, you know, other than that, I haven't lived here all that long. I don't know, not to say that's a strength, but sometimes it's helpful to have, you know, someone who has a different perspective on, who hasn't been in the town forever. And I'm sure there's a lot to learn about navigating everything, especially with something like building. But I think sometimes having someone who is from the outside can be helpful.
Does that answer your question, John?
Okay, good, thank you.
My question is, can you describe the difference between the role of a chief librarian and a trustee of the library?
Well, I assume the chief librarian is the one who, you know, actually is employed by the library and makes the day-to-day decisions on the catalog and signs off on the programming. And then the board, you know, has oversight probably in selecting that person, and the broader strategic plan. The only boards I have sat on have been quite a while ago, but, you know, I actually do a fair amount of work with corporate boards and kind of understand the difference between the day-to-day and the board oversight and the role of the board.
Right, thank you. David? Is there anyone else, does anyone else have another question?
You're not?
Is the board ready to make a decision, or should we consider the two candidates at our next meeting?
I do have one question, Anne, and that would be what the current Board of Trustees, what their inclination would be. And David, you said you have 3 members on the Board of Trustees?
There's only a total of 3. I wish there were 5. I would hope that maybe in the future, especially if the state grant for planning and development of a new library edition goes through as expected next year, and the town approves the $150,000 we'll be asking them for continuation of that planning, I hope that whoever makes that decision, I assume it's the select board, will allow us to
I'm
add.
just gonna pull back to what I was asking. I wanna stay focused on that because I know we do have time constraints. So just if you could tell us what your board of 3 at this point, or however.
Two, actually, there's
Two.
only two.
Right,
Fill that
of
first
2.
one.
You and,
Correct, yes.
what your
Could
inclination
we
is.
ask you specifically what you're looking for in a trustee?
Right.
Okay, that's a very good question. So there are 3 attributes that Rick and I agree upon that we need as a trustee. And I think John hit upon one of the key point. I'm 76 years old, and the other trustee is talking about counting down the number of days until his retirement. We agree that we need another perspective. We want this perspective from the children's room. It's an important segment of the community. It's a very active segment of that community. And we feel like we need that young parent viewpoint coming into the library because we feel like we're out of touch in that category. So we want an advocate for the children's room. Secondly, point number 2, as I've already emphasized, we want to acquire property. That requires negotiation skills. It requires somebody that's willing to get down in the trenches and talk to these property owners who may not be quite ready yet to transfer their properties to the town, and the town may not be ready yet to make that decision. But those are other skills we want. Then we want, perhaps most importantly, someone that's good at aligning the special interest groups in this town. We know we can't do this on our own. We do have to team up with the community center, with the Council on Aging, with the push for a senior center, with the push for archiving precious documents here in this town hall, the library, across the street, the museum. In other words, bring somebody that can bring these community interest groups together so that we'll all be on one big umbrella, whether it's physically or through programming or meeting sites. That's a tough task. So those 3 criteria are what we're looking for. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you. And my next question, again, is, are we ready to make a decision? Or we have 2 very qualified and very different candidates. Are we ready to make a decision tonight, or should we consider this again at our next meeting?
And if I may,
John? Becky, of course.
I kind of feel that with the fact that they're down to 2, the library trustees are down to 2 people, I think that if we can move forward this evening, we would be better off doing so to help them.
I would agree with Becky on that.
Okay, then I would entertain a motion to approve one or the other candidates.
I would like to make a motion to approve Sarah Davis for library trustee interim until the upcoming elections in the spring, with great thanks to both. And I suggest Sarah simply because I think that as the library trustees said, a perspective from the children's department as well as negotiation skills would be helpful.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Meeting ready to vote? Becky,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes,
and I say yes. Thank you very much,
And David should vote
Leslie.
also.
I'm sorry.
Hmm?
David
David?
votes.
Yes, it's a
I would
joint,
say
it's a
yes.
joint vote.
Thank you.
And
Okay.
is Rick on?
I don't know if it's on.
I don't believe Rick is
Thank you.
online.
Can I say one more thing? Leslie is one of my
Yes.
favorite people in town. And if we do expand this committee, I would campaign for Leslie and put a sign out on my property, and I would actually raise funds for her benefit. If we don't, we are planning to have a focus committee with the expansion of the library. We have hired a consultant to help us with this process, and I would hope that you'd help to lead the focus committee.
Thank you
Thank you.
very,
Thank you so
very
much.
much.
Thank you both. Thank you very much.
Lots of options for
Thank you
people to
both.
help in
Yeah,
town.
that was
Don't
good.
go away.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Leslie.
Question with the card,
Okay.
how do you expand the, if you wanted to add the other person,
What's the question?
how would you do that?
Would you need to state your name and address, I'm sorry.
Sure.
For the
Michael
record.
Gates, 31 School Street. I was just curious how you would go about adding an additional member to trustees if you wanted to.
Right, so that would actually be a bylaw change, that would be a town meeting vote.
So could we put that on our action list for October? No, probably for September. We could do it at the November town meeting.
Okay, all right. The 9/5 meeting or the 9/18, Ann?
19's going up.
9/18's getting busy.
I don't know when the warrant will close for November, so probably sooner is better. Okay,
Like pen.
okay. Now we can move on to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee, and the first applicant in my packet is Michael Gates. Michael, can if you're there, and I can't tell who's there, introduce yourself briefly.
Hello, my name is Michael Gates, 31 School Street. I submitted an application to volunteer for the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee, in part just because I was wondering what the committee is actually up to in town, and there are certainly different issues I've thought about as a regular cyclist and pedestrian. I periodically will walk from Salem to Manchester and Salem to Gloucester and all sorts of places, and I've biked all over the place. I nearly died on the bridge crossing 128 because I was in a collision with a car. And so I've had some thoughts on things that could be improved. And someone posted that they were looking for volunteers, so I thought I would look into it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Questions? Becky?
Do you have any time constraints?
It's just really a specific day. Wednesday evenings I will not be available.
Do you know when they meet?
No, that's what I was
Wednesday
wondering.
evening.
Is that okay?
Wednesday or Thursday?
No.
Okay, so that was the question I had.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
That's my question.
Okay. Brian?
No, not at this point. No.
Becky? And I'm sorry, Becky. Kathy?
Yeah, so, Michael, thank you for stepping up and answering the call. You mentioned, you're kind of a long range, I'll phrase it, a long range cyclist and pedestrian.
Yes.
Is there anything in particular that you'd want to focus on as a member of the Bike and Ped Committee. They seem to have a very long list of projects they're interested in. I was curious as to what your focus was.
My general thought is just, I've volunteered previously with groups like Bikes Not Bombs, and in general advocating for bicycling and commuting by bicycle too. So I think the town is somewhat lacking in certain aspects of that, which is even just like a simple place for someone to lock up their bike sheltered where it's not getting destroyed. I know some people who bike year-round commuting to the train, and their bike just gets destroyed down at the station because they don't really have a covered area to put it. Just little things like that that are pretty minimal and not too invasive and not too controversial. Because I know even with speed limits in town, some people get very confrontational depending on some things that are going on. And then just walking around, some of the pedestrian measures I've seen. There's a Manchester Facebook page that's unofficial that somebody runs, and there are always complaints that a lot of parents have about their children always getting run down on School Street and Pleasant Street, and trying to figure out ways to do some traffic calming measures to improve their own sanity, I think, with their children, concerns about their children getting run over. And certainly I've had some dust ups myself, so those are the things that I would be most interested in, just improving the situation for people who do maybe want to feel more comfortable commuting in town with a bike, and just making it a little easier for people if they do want to do that. And, from the pedestrian side of it, more or less just improving some of the streets that maybe at the moment aren't really pedestrian friendly, because there's certain areas where the sidewalk basically disappears, and then you're just sort of on your own in the lane with cars to walk across, which for me is fine, but I can understand most people aren't that comfortable with doing that. So I think it almost disincentivizes people from choosing to walk if they wanted to. So things of that nature.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy, anything more?
Nope, that's it.
John?
No, I don't think I have anything. I just want to thank Mike for volunteering. It sounds like you certainly walk a great deal and certainly cycle a great deal, so you have firsthand input as to, and opinions as to how you think things should look in the future. So thanks again for volunteering.
Okay,
Yes, thank you, Michael.
thank you. The next applicant is Ryan Chamberlain. Ryan, can you unmute yourself and, if possible, start your video and explain why you're interested in the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for your time. I relatively new to the community. I've lived here for about 2 years. I have a couple of kids that that either bike or walk to school, and so I saw a post that there was an advertisement that there was an opportunity to get involved within the community, which was something that I was seeking out. And as an avid cyclist, pedestrian myself, I thought I'd go ahead and throw my name in the hat. I've seen a lot of activity happening lately. I kind of look at Exit 50, where that's recently been resurfaced, and was really happy to see those the bicycle paintings on the roads. There's creation of a specific lane off to the side and a portion of that to encourage bicycle safety. And so for those reasons, I went ahead and applied for the committee. And I guess I would also kind of caveat that a bit with, I guess a desire to just learn more about the type of topics that this committee would be involved in. Just trying to figure out, this would be my first foray into public service, and I always try to look for ways to make my community better.
Thank you. Becky?
Yes, thank you, Ryan, for also stepping up as well as Michael. It's always nice to see more interest. My question is time constraints. Do you have any that would interfere with the meetings?
Yeah, I mean, I have a full-time job, so I work Monday through Friday. Typically go into the city Tuesday through Thursday, would be available most evenings. But other than that, it's mostly just 9 to 5 during the workday that I wouldn't be available.
Thank you.
Brian?
No, that was the question I had as far as, that's always the question. Thank you.
Kathy?
Yeah, Ryan, thank you again for stepping up. You mentioned that you have school-age children. Are they in the Manchester Essex School District? Because I know the Bike and Ped Committee was interested in strengthening the connection to the district itself.
Yeah, so I have, my youngest child is entering into 4th grade at the elementary school, and my oldest child is entering into 7th grade at the middle/high school.
Thank you. And just one more question. Is there anything in particular that you would like to focus on? You mentioned, the fact that you have children, and that may be a deciding factor, but anything in particular, you're a cyclist and a pedestrian, where would you see yourself focusing?
Yeah, I think a couple of different aspects. I think one is just around increasing safety, so making sure that crosswalks are clearly marked, that you've got appropriate notifications that something could be happening, particularly for children. I think a lot of that also goes with the quality of the road. So to the extent that you've got a lot of potholes in a certain district or an area that's difficult to navigate, then those issues would need to be addressed just from a safety issue. And then the other aspect I would think is maybe an opportunity to better promote opportunities within the community. It's a relatively small geographic space that we have, and so if there's anything that we could do to encourage those small trips, a quick trip to Crosby's, a quick trip to maybe vote at the elementary school, maybe just give a second thought as to whether or not you would take your vehicle or whether you could easily do that by foot or by cycle. So those would be the two aspects.
Thank you.
John?
Yeah, thank you very much for volunteering, Ryan. And I think my questions more or less have been answered by the others, but I just want to reinforce the fact that we always appreciate, well, shall I say, younger residents who have young children, or I guess medium-aged children like you, to get their perspectives into what's going on in town government. So thank you.
We have an unusual situation. Sorry about that. The Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee currently, or most recently, had 8 members. And we try to have an uneven number of members to reduce the number of tie votes. And we could decide that the committee should be 7 members, which is really a more manageable number than 9, in which case we would appoint neither of these people, which seems kind of hard. Or we could decide that the committee should have 9 members, in which case we can appoint both of them. Becky, what are your thoughts on that?
I do think more can be unwieldy. Do we have any input from the Bike Ped, the current committee?
Yes, as the liaison to the Bike and Ped Committee, I've exchanged a few emails today with David Saunders and Terry Cowman. Are either of them on the call right now?
I don't see them on.
Okay, so I can certainly relay the feedback. They're actually comfortable with the 8. They do not feel the need to make it an odd number. They are comfortable with the 8, and they posted the opening because somebody recently resigned, I believe, and so the adding a member to the committee would be for, I believe, a 1-year term to finish out the term of the person who left.
Resigned.
If I recall. So the other thing, I just did a quick check. The meetings are mostly on Wednesday nights. So, yes, I just looked at the agenda. Actually, they're in the evenings. If that was a concern, I should just check my calendar here. Because they were on, they usually run like 6 or 7 o'clock, something like that. So they're early evening, around dinner time. So if that is a constraining factor,
For 2 months it was.
okay. They have, met on Thursdays, like they did a Thursday meeting last week, which was off cycle, so it's not, set in stone, but their meetings are normally on a Wednesday night, so I just thought I'd mention that. And the other thing I would mention is at the last meeting, as I just previously stated, they're kind of looking for that tie to the school, to tighten that up with the district. They do have parents on the committee, but I'm not sure those children attend the MERSD school district, and they may be in a private school, so. Anyway, that's the feedback I have from the Bike and Ped Committee.
Thank you. Are there any, I guess at this point, I would entertain a motion to appoint one or the other of these gentlemen for the remaining term. And the term of the person who resigned.
So I will move to appoint Ryan Chamberlain to a 1-year term to finish out the remaining term of, I apologize, I don't know who it was that left the committee.
Was it Kurt Fataka?
Yeah.
I think it was.
Okay, so I make that motion.
Right.
Okay. I will second.
Is there a second?
I will second.
Meeting ready to vote?
Yes.
Becky,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes,
Yes.
John. And I vote yes. Thank you both very much.
thank you
I
very
hope we
much.
will see
There'll
you
be other
again,
openings, I promise.
Mr.
I
Gates.
hope you raise your hand again.
Thank you
Michael,
very much. I
come
look
back
forward
and
to
please.
strong
Yeah.
contributions.
Thank
to
you,
the committee.
Ryan.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Michael, I hope we see you.
Yes, would like to see you again.
Yes.
There's all kinds of needs.
Your parents are, it's always nice to see them.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is the introduction of the town green.
So we have with us tonight Maureen Allwood, who's the director of Town Green, and Dick Crowdy, who is the director, chair of the board of Town Green. Town Green is a nonprofit organization serving the greater Cape Ann area, with a focus currently on the 4 Cape Ann communities, working on climate-related issues, from advocacy to education to working on specific projects. So tonight they're here to give an introduction to you about some of the work that they are able to do and that they have been doing and what they plan to be doing in the future, as a way of, as I say, as a way of introduction to all of you and to the community at large. And so with that, I can turn it over to Maureen and Dick.
Thank you.
Should we sit? Is that the best way to?
Why don't we,
Do you want to sit over there, maybe?
sit over here?
Oh, sit over here, okay.
What do you think?
Comfortable.
It's a little more comfortable there and everybody out there can see you.
Yes, my behind is a little sore now.
Well, great.
The chair does rise up and down.
Yeah,
I noticed it's a little low.
It's
but
it's
anyways.
okay, I'll make do.
Okay.
Greg, thank you for that introduction. As Greg said, my name is Maureen Aylward. I'm the Director of Town Green, and I'm here with Dick Prouty, the Board Chair. Thank you so much for making the time tonight to add us to your agenda. So as Greg did my introduction for me, the Town Green is focusing on preparing Cape Ann for the impacts of climate change. And our presentation this evening will just take you through actually how we're doing that. Do you want me to say next slide?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
if I'm smart enough, I'll anticipate, but.
This is our mission. What I really like about this mission is the word catalyst. So, we're a catalyst for education around climate. We're a catalyst for learning and engagement. So that's what we're all about. We're about action, information, and services. We are also focusing on, reducing the use of fossil fuels, getting to what's called net zero. And hopefully with a strong grid and some changes, we're in the middle of the great energy transition right now. And so it's gonna take some time, but we believe that it can happen, again, with a strong grid. And we're a vehicle for helping people to understand and make that transition. Next slide. Dick's gonna give a timeline because he's the founder.
A little history. I actually taught in Manchester High School in the 70s for 10 years. Then I left to work for Project Adventure and was a director for 34 years. And I retired in 2014, and I wanted to do something different, and I wanted to do something that was meaningful. And I knew climate was going to be a bigger deal every year because I could see the trends, and that's certainly proven to be true. So we started out as a program under another nonprofit I helped start called the Gloucester Meeting House Foundation. We held sustainability fairs in Gloucester, 3 of them, at different places. We did a whole solarize the community drive, and we have over 1,000 people get discounts on solar installations. In 2020, we began raising money to hire the Harvard Graduate School of Design to do scenario planning of what would happen in certain situations in the future with climate. What were the threats and what were the options and solutions to mitigate the threats? So the steering committee became an independent nonprofit in 2021. This is our second year. In 2022, we became an independent. We became an independent nonprofit in 2022, and this is our second full year. So we're now, having raised some money, get a budget. Maureen is our director, and we are enlarging our board of directors. And we just want to introduce ourselves to Select Board because part of what we're doing this to all Select Boards. Part of what we are doing is looking to launch municipal services. Next slide.
So we have a 3-pronged approach. We're focusing on climate awareness education for the public and also for municipal leaders. There's a lot to learn, there's a lot to understand, and we have some ways of doing that we feel are working right now, which we'll get some examples in a moment. Also municipal services, which Dick will talk about in a little bit, and advocacy and action, which is could be a very long list of things, but we're mostly focusing on mitigation and adaptation right now. Next slide. So what is climate awareness education? Last year we started with our Planning for Reality series, and the way that we set that up was a series of webinars in each community, followed by field trips. And how that works, for instance, we worked with Gloucester and Rockport already. We have done 3 webinars on a climate issue or a climate impact issue in those communities. And we have a panel of experts. Charles Waldheim from Harvard, who's done scenario planning. He can speak to those issues around what it looks like in the future. And Jane Knott, an MIT PhD who's also on our board, who looks at the climate science. Oftentimes we'll have a local expert also sit on the panel. We provide opportunities for breakout sessions, questions and answers. Often we have about 80 to 100 people register for these in the community and across Cape Ann. Between 60 and 80 come. And then following those webinars, we have on-location field trips. For the field trips, for each one that we've had, both in Gloucester and Rockport, 30 people show up at each one. People are interested in this. They want to see climate impacts up close. It's an experiential process, also led by a guide, a professional guide or someone who's a local expert in the area or in the community. So we've done it in, as I mentioned, in Gloucester and Rockport. We're doing Essex this fall. And we'd also like to do Manchester in the late fall. One thing that we're adding this year is in-person workshops. And we like this idea of in-person workshops because they are going to be participatory. So people would come to a program in the evening, on a Saturday, whatever, and go through, like games or ways that we can get the participants moving together, talking together. It won't be a lecture. And this year we received a grant to work with the 3 high schools, the green teams of the high schools. Manchester, of course, has a great green team, Rockport and Gloucester as well. And we will be facilitating conversations between the 3 groups of students. We will be offering them some money to do a project and then having a community presentation at the end. We're really excited about getting that started. And also, Town Green has the ability to do large group convenings, either around an issue that might be surfacing in the community, or to bring people together to find out what they might be interested in. That could be, a large group project that Dick will get into with municipal services, focus groups, interviews, and such. So, next slide. Thank you. Oh, sorry, I forgot about the example. So here's our webinar, just a quick screenshot to let you see what it looks like. We take people through about an hour and a half presentation, half an hour of engagement. And that's a picture from one of our field trips to Good Harbor Beach. That was on a January day and amidst a storm. And look at that crowd. Like, these people came out, people had cameras, but they listened to Jane Knott talk about what's happening to the beach. What happens at the beach of the storm. The parking lot at Good Harbor Beach had, knee-high water in it. And we talked about the marsh. So, next slide.
So, we will be offering services, some supported by grants, some fee for service, to the municipalities, working closely with Gloucester, who has sustainability, new director Gemma Wilkins. But the other communities do not, and we believe there's a need there. And so we're going to be offering our services and helping them do outreach on different issues that they may have in the community, to engage the public and help the public understand what is going on in their planning process and the options. We do interviews with different groups, and basically it's our experience that a lot of towns the different committees don't know what's going on necessarily in the other committees. And so facilitating the interaction and communication between the different committees is a good service and a good thing to help communities with. And then we customize to the different needs of each community, which will be different. Next slide. So we are, looking at these areas, trust building, building trust within the community about understanding what's happening and trusting the information, because we're really trying to represent science. What does science say are the range of options that will happen, and what does science say are the possibilities for mitigating the difficulties with climate that are inevitable coming our way. And then we look at how we can bring together creative options, and some low cost, some very expensive. There are very big grants coming down, for example, in the area of ecological restoration to restore marshes in certain areas, the Great Marsh and so forth. And so we'll be working with different participants in that. Next slide. And then, we hope to be able to take engage and do something ourselves as Town Green, or facilitate another action by another nonprofit or facility or a municipality. Climate is such a big issue, it goes across everything, that we have to have the public and private sector, the business community, NGOs, nonprofits, and government work together. That's certainly Governor Healy's approach. It's President Biden's approach. All of government has to work together and collaborate. And so we'll be taking that approach on Cape Ann, and we're working, Maureen is planning with the chamber to set up a separate committee on climate for business people, for example. And then the idea of how do we, work with people to decarbonize and work for a sustainable future. And we have a couple of options there we're thinking about, so next slide. This is Addison Gilbert Hospital, part of the Leahy system. They are actually a good candidate for a large solar system, rooftop and parking lot. You're able now to, have solar over a parking lot and do charging, electric car charging there. And we are also looking at the possibility of geothermal, because this is a new thing coming down, and there's a lot of innovative money coming out of the state to support feasibility studies for geothermal. So this is one option. This would take a couple of years to get going, but it's an interesting one, and there certainly would be, we would first do a feasibility study with the hospital and with another solar person that we'd facilitate. And that, the goal here is to get the first responders. Certainly we want the hospital, and we want the police and the fire, in the advent of a big storm, whether it's a winter storm or a hurricane, whatever, to be able to have power and communications going with batteries. And they have now generators at all these places, but it would be better, it would be cleaner to have, electric energy and batteries for storing over, you can go up to a month now with some of these big batteries.
The technology is there.
Technology is going very rapidly.
Yeah.
So that's just an example of the type of project that we would be thinking about.
Yeah.
And I've had some preliminary conversations with the hospital already, and they're interested.
So you've heard a brief overview of Town Green and our three main areas of education and services and advocacy and action. Do you have any questions for us?
Dan, if I might?
Certainly, please.
Two things I wanted to ask about. You mentioned something late fall in Manchester. Is this something that you envision for the whole community, or more oriented towards the schools?
Well, there's two things happening. So what we want to do is the Planning for Reality series, which would be webinars, probably 2 in Manchester and 2 field trips. And, we've talked to Greg about some of this and what the issues in Manchester could be covered. And we like to coordinate those topics with the municipality. So it would be along those lines, a webinar, a field trip. And
For
then,
example, tied into the vulnerability assessment of the village area,
Yep.
that created a pretty long list of possibilities in terms of action steps.
Mm-hmm.
So with Town Green, we could facilitate a few sessions to focus on how do we pick and choose from that list, what's the higher
And that-
priority.
That might be an in-person workshop too. And so we would like to have the series completed in Manchester by the end of the year. Webinar, field trip, in-person workshop.
And I like and appreciate that you all are science and data based. That's pretty important in my opinion. I also feel that part of our job as the select board is to help facilitate education. But I also think it's important to do it in a way that's not going to cause extreme discomfort or panic. So this is, and I know we've got a lot that is coming at us quickly in some ways.
We've had a lot of success
Yeah.
in our webinars with showing the science and showing the scenarios of what could happen here, and then talking about the action steps that can be done. We think that the folks who have been coming to the webinars, they're accepting the information. They always have really good questions. They want to be engaged and find out what they can do. So, you know, we're trying to avoid any kind of, you know, panic situation. We're going to come right in on the science. We're going to show them the roads that are going to flood, for instance, or we're going to show them what the scenario could look like if a hurricane, a Category 3 hurricane, hit the area. So, you know, Manchester has certain areas that will be devastated and also flooded. So that's what we mean about preparing people. You really need to know what's going to happen.
I think people generally are sort of relieved that they're getting this information specifically.
There is,
Because
yeah,
they read the Globe
it's
or,
true.
you know, the Wall Street Journal about the country or another location, but there's not a lot of specific about their place, what's gonna happen here. So when we talked about downtown Rockport, that's pretty, you know, Bearskin Neck is extremely exposed. I think there were shop owners there, they were relieved to know, what can I do, how can I plan, what can I, you know, how can I get ready? And they know that there'll be different types of threats, some will be a lot milder than others, and you can't protect from every threat, but you can increase your odds of being more resilient by action now. And some of it doesn't take a lot of money, and some of it takes big money. For the bigger money, nobody's expecting the towns. There's gonna be state and federal in the next at least 3 to 5 years.
So this is with the most current FEMA maps.
Yes.
Yeah.
And with storm surge maps that are continually updated, you know, you can go online and go to Surging Seas, or, you know, go to a lot of these places. NOAA, in fact, has a really good map where you actually can zero in on your neighborhood and find out, okay, what is it gonna look at 2 feet? What is it gonna look at 3 feet? What is it gonna look at 5 feet? So you get a sense. And, you know, we talk a lot about incremental sea level rise, which is what we're experiencing right now. That's not gonna stop, right? So there are these two elements there. Incremental sea level rise that's happening and growing, and also as the ocean warms, it's gonna accelerate. And then there's, you know, storm surge on top of that. So both of those things are working together, and I think, like Dick mentioned, we're finding this appetite. We're finding people are hungry for this. They want to know what's coming. They want to be educated. They want to know what they can do. You know, I think we all want to be prepared.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions?
Yeah, I do. I have a couple of questions. So you mentioned the webinars, the field trip. 2 questions basically. have you made any connections already to our sustainability committee or the committee that you put together, Greg, the impromptu group around climate resilience?
Right, so,
Is this connect, I'm trying to
right,
understand the connection to what we already have in process.
so, those connections need to be strengthened, but introductions are being made and have been made.
Okay. And then.
So a few of the committee members have been going to some of the webinars that they've been doing already.
So I'm trying to understand if we entertained doing something similar to Essex or the other towns, the workshops or whatever, what's the expected outcome? What do we expect to get out of this that we're not already doing,
You mean the town?
the town? Yes.
Um,
Because we are doing some things, I'm just trying to understand the delta. What does this help us accelerate, or what gap does it fill? I'm
but
just
you
trying to
want, you
understand.
want, Greg, is that a question for you?
For both, so
Okay.
I'll take the initial stab, and then you can
Okay, yeah.
fill in. So a couple of things. One, it provides a bigger foundation for our efforts. So talk about our village vulnerability assessment. Layering on top of that, some of the Harvard studies and projections that have taken place. So Town Green could facilitate bringing those presentations in conjunction with what our engineers have done. So it'll give a bigger context for that work. And then just sometimes it's helpful to have a third party facilitate meetings
Yeah.
and gather information from our residents, and to help us understand what our residents are thinking and where their priorities might be. So that's another area that I think it could facilitate.
Okay, so are we still engaging with that consulting group that did the coastal vulnerability?
So their contract is
Assessment?
over.
Their contract, so they're
They're done with their work.
Okay,
Right, so
that's what I'm trying to understand, because we're doing a lot of different things, and I'm just
Yeah.
trying to understand what's.
Does
How does
Town
that
Green have the information that we got from the vulnerability group?
no, they're not
And
giving the
have
full
you
report
considered
yet,
it,
but,
if you've seen it?
we certainly can and will.
Yes. Another thing that the town gains from, Town Green, working with the town of Manchester and in the public, is that a lot of people come to the webinars that are not from Manchester. So we have a lot of folks who join the Gloucester, who are not from Gloucester. They come on the field trips that they're not from Gloucester, but they're interested. And so it allows further exposure to what Manchester is doing, which is excellent, and helps the region understand what Manchester is doing. And so therefore maybe have some expectations. So I think there's a lot of benefit. One is, it's really community engagement, what we're doing, community outreach, community education. That is on top of all the other things that you're doing.
So I like the fact that you're engaging with the other Cape Ann communities. I mean, anything related to climate is really regional, right? No one town can stand on its own, so I really like that aspect. My only feedback is, should we decide to engage Town Green specifically, let's get crisp on what the outcome's gonna be and how it connects to everything else we're doing. And because we have already had a public forum, I'm not sure if I'm using the right term, on that coastal vulnerability plan. So they've already been engaged, and to add another entity in without a very crisp, clear plan may just confuse people.
And the fee
Right.
structuring.
Yeah, so I just think the work you're doing is great, but there's gotta be a plan for how we engage, what we engage on, what we expect to get.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I guess my question is, what are you looking for from us?
This was just an introduction to what we're about, and I think we may be looking to you for cooperation in the future should this go ahead, and I think that's something that Greg can work with you on, developing a plan for, and then seeing if we're the right people and how we fit, what our deliverables are, and crisp it is. I think those are all good questions. So we don't have a concrete proposal. We're not looking for a yes or a no now. This was just an introduction, the first step for you to get to know us and put some faces on something. You know.
And it's also worth noting that the Planning for Reality series, the webinars, the field trips, and likely one in-person workshop, they're free. So there's no charge to the town for
Yeah,
that.
we're raising corporate sponsors for the
Yeah.
planning for, to sponsor the education pieces, we're to have corporate sponsors doing that.
Yeah, and we've received several grants, so it's at no cost. We're coming in to provide, you know, information to the community and having a discussion about these issues.
How do you plan to
I've-
involve the community? How do you? Sorry, John, please go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. It'd be fairly specific with regard to a forum that we'll have coming up in a couple of months or so with regard to Ocean Street. You're probably not familiar with that, but that's got a resiliency problem and regularly gets overrun with high tides and storms and that sort of thing. And we've got to figure out what to do about that. And I'm wondering if there isn't a role that you could play in kind of setting the stage for what might be realistic and what might not be realistic. Certainly our Department of Public Works has some thoughts about the street and constantly repaving it and redoing it and have the ocean just destroy it a year or two later. And I think we have to have some sort of a perspective on, from a longer term as to what's going to make sense there. And I'm wondering if you've dealt with that with other communities with specific types of challenges, because we have to figure out what kinds of inputs we're going to get for that forum when we pull together all of the folks from that neighborhood who have opinions about what we should be doing about the street and the storm threats.
Yeah, I mean, road infrastructure and the impacts of seawater on the road are certainly issues that we are addressing in the other communities. For instance, in Essex, we are doing a program that takes a look at the causeway, and we're also going to be looking at the marsh. But you know, the causeway and Apple Street are, and Apple Street particularly, somewhat contentious right now. But it's a necessary conversation that they want to have, and so you know, that could be one of the webinars that we offer with these experts who have more information about what can be done, or what the town needs to think about for Ocean Street. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a great possibility.
Sometimes it's just a lot of dialogue is necessary before tough decisions can be made. And, you know, you have to just invest in the time. And sometimes people take a while to understand it. And then, oh, this is not going away. It's, you know, it's not going to start getting cooler 2 years from now. Wishful thinking, you know. So I think this is a year that if we look at what's happening in the heat waves, I mean, fortunately we've had a very cool August, which I love. But heat's also going to be an issue in the future. You know, we need to get ready for. We don't know how far away that is, but we need to get ready for cooling shelters for older people. Those kinds of resilient things too. It's not all just about water. That's a big threat to a coastal community, but I think heat is coming too.
Okay. Well, I think that might be worth while exploring, Greg. You're probably closer to that. I know you're closer to that than we are, because you're directly involved with the organization. But it seems to me that some sort of a setting of the table, providing some input about what's realistic and what's not, before you get into some of the details, is appropriate.
Yeah. Further questions? Thank you very much. I'm sure, since Greg is part of.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for having us again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate the time.
That we will be hearing more about it.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Yeah. The next item on the agenda is the facilities master plan. for discussion. I don't see the facilities master plan in the packet. What's the state, Greg?
Right, so we will have an initial draft to you at your next meeting, and you can have a more, you'll have it before the next meeting. So we can have a more in-depth discussion about the actual draft plan. I thought tonight, if there were some specific areas that you wanted to focus on, we could tee that up, or if you prefer to wait for the plan and wait until your next meeting, that's fine as well, but we had talked about wanting to keep this moving, so I just wanted to give this opportunity to talk through some of the potential projects, potential funding strategies, sort of at the higher level, rather than getting too deep into the weeds. We'll save that for when we have the report in front of us. So this is an opportunity to have a preliminary discussion before we dive into the details that the study will contain.
Okay. Becky, do you have any?
I'd like to wait until I see the information myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Likewise.
That's my feeling.
Yeah.
It's hard to discuss something when I don't know what it is.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I've outlined in my article last week in the paper, just sort of that high level view of what the most likely projects are gonna be. It's not that, there's no big secret out there in terms of what the needs are likely to be. But we certainly can wait until you have the study in your hand, and that's perfectly reasonable. And we can tee that up for your next meeting.
General question, the content of the plan will be the facility item or building or whatever, approximate cost, and from a time frame standpoint, what should we expect to see in that draft plan? Is it the shovel-ready date, or is it the
No.
doors open date?
So it's not gonna give you that kind of a prescribed direction. It'll be more baseline information about the conditions of buildings, probable cost, rough estimated cost for Plan X, new DPW facility, either at its current location or up at the school street, is that $22 million rough estimation.
Okay, but what about time frame? Is it, we've got to have something, whether it's the remaining useful life of the building.
Right, so it'll prioritize, it'll say,
Okay.
it'll say the DPW garage is the most pressing need, so that's priority number one. It'll identify, police and fire as needing either major upgrades or a new facility, certainly within the next 10 years at the absolute
Like I
latest.
said, don't expect.
Senior center,
Some type of date would be helpful. Date range,
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's some parameters,
Parameters, yeah.
but it doesn't give a prescribed,
Right.
X, Y, year one, year two, year three.
Okay.
It leaves that up for you to talk through and for us all to debate and come up with that kind of game plan.
Thank you.
So we'll get that ready, get it out to you, hopefully a week ahead of time, so you have some time to pour through it before the meeting.
Okay, the next question is speeding. I think we should talk separately about speeding and parking on Beach Street, and let's start with the police chief's report on speeding, in which he makes very clear that most of the people who are speeding in town are in fact residents and their first stop, and that the number of stops has been increasing over the past couple of years. Is there further discussion. Becky, do you have comments on that? Does any? go ahead.
No, not yet.
So we do have
Does,
Chief Fitzgerald and Officer Loof here who can provide more details on the data if that's desired by the board.
Mhm. Does anyone have any specific questions for Chief Fitzgerald?
This is just on Beach Street, correct, Ann?
This is speeding throughout.
No, this
Or
is
speeding in
speeding
general?
anywhere.
Okay,
What's that, Beach
This is
Street?
speeding in general and then parking on Beach Street.
okay.
Yeah, the
So-
numbers I provided you are how much.
So maybe a question to start the discussion would be, we know you're doing some things already, some mitigations, like, I think there's something on School Street, Pleasant Street that cross, what's it called, the pedestrian
Oh, the crossing lights?
crossing
Yeah,
lights.
that-
So I guess, could you bring us up to speed
yeah.
on the mitigations that are already in process so that we make sure we're level
So,
set?
I don't know, is Chuck on?
He's not, but there,
He's not, but those speed, or the pedestrian crossing lights, I spoke to Sean Johnson the other day, I think it was last Thursday. All those lights are in and it's just waiting on to be installed.
So we're gonna see the lights installed, it's gonna be like on School Street, right at the Pleasant Street intersection, is that where it's gonna be,
It's
or is it
gonna
gonna
be
be?
School and Pleasant and Pine and Pleasant.
Okay, so we're gonna have, what are they called again, I'm sorry?
Yeah, self-activated.
Self-activated
Pedestrian crossing.
pedestrian, okay, great,
That's something, I mean, Chuck was the lead on that. So
Yep,
we
okay,
have more information.
and is there anything else, Greg, that, you wanna bring us up, anything else that is already in process that might help, that we may not be aware of or need to be reminded of?
well, I would probably have the chief and Sergeant talk about just the enforcement activities in terms of we do have the speed control signs, the automatic ones up. There's also the trailer.
The trailers, we have the passive traffic counter, which is pole mounted on Hickory Hill. We got another complaint on Hickory Hill the other day from another resident. As a matter of fact, I think they'll be coming to you shortly to ask the speed to be reduced to 15 miles an hour. However, it is posted 25 miles an hour right now. It does not meet, Hickory Hill itself does not meet the requirements for a so-called safety zone, similar to like Lower Pine Street with the elderly housing. So that's coming. We have Sergeant Loof is my number 3. He's on the day shift. He, now with the extra personnel, we are able to dedicate someone all the time when the personnel are on duty on the day shift to certain areas of town when we get complaints. On our website, we have the traffic complaint form that fills out. It gets emailed to each of the sergeants so they know where the complaints are coming from and they dedicate the traffic enforcement to those areas. And unfortunately, we get complaints from all over town. With 2 people on the road, we can't be everywhere at once, and it's unreasonable to me to think that we're gonna stop all speeding. However, as you can see, in 2022, we made 1,787 traffic stops, and that works out to, I think it averaged out to almost 5 a day, but still, there could be 10 in one day, 0 the next, it all depends on weather and what's going on.
When we take that data in from the community and they tell us the troubled areas, I put it on a patrol guide. It's the very last thing that officers see on the way out the door with those areas that they should be enforcing traffic. And we have a good group of people who are dedicated to traffic and they're out there every day in taking pride in what they do.
Further questions for?
I do have one.
I have
Oh, sorry,
a
John.
question, Ann.
Yes, John.
Yes, when we spoke about speeding a number of months ago, in particular on Pine Street, I know that there was discussion about changing some of the speed limits there and then monitoring the speed to see if that in fact changed at all the habits that people had in terms of driving on the street there. And I'm wondering where that initiative stands.
Yeah, so I believe the DPW has changed the signs, however, they didn't change it all the way down due to the fact that we have that established safety zone because of Newport Park. But the
Yeah.
speed trailers have been out there, so I just need to get the data.
So those are data that are coming
Yep.
eventually?
Yes.
Okay, good, just want to know, I'm curious.
Becky?
Thank you, Ann. What I'm looking at, the traffic study I'm looking at, it does say Beach Street, but this is, you said, townwide
The
information?
numbers I gave you in my memo are townwide, and then
Okay.
because of it was kind of confusing, the posting, whether we were talking about traffic speeding townwide or traffic
Okay.
speeding on Beach Street. So I sent you the latest
Yeah, I
traffic
got that.
study on Beach
Okay.
Street.
Thank you. The question I have here, looking at the numbers of vehicles exceeding 39 miles per hour down Beach Street, which is 20 miles per hour, the fact that we have almost 250, actually more than that exceed that. And you said that the bulk of those are actually townspeople. Is that with the stops that you all have, they're mostly townspeople and?
I believe so, I didn't see that data, but, yeah, I would say the people traveling in and out of town downtown are more than likely residents. When people make a car stop, the general feeling is if it's a town resident and it's their first time, we always run their in-house history. If they have involvement with us, more than likely they're gonna get a paid ticket.
Yep.
If they have no involvement whatsoever, we've never seen them before, we try to be a little lenient with them,
Yep.
maybe a little community policing aspect to it, give them a warning, and that's a teachable moment there, where we can talk to each and every driver we stop, educate about the speed limits in town, and that's the goal of what we try to do with every car stop. But to answer your question, I believe it is more residents than not.
Thank you.
I have a question on that. When you just give a verbal warning, does that go on a record somewhere where you can find it?
Yes, goes in our in-house computer system.
To follow that question up a
Okay,
little
so,
bit, I'm sorry,
so you know that you've given someone a verbal warning,
yes.
Yep.
even though it has no impact on their,
So for example, we had an
Okay,
incident
thank you.
on last Thursday where a town resident was stopped for in town for a motor vehicle violation. They were given a warning back in March, and they were given a ticket, a moving violation on Thursday for the same violation in the same location. Then that resident came in and wanted to file a complaint against the office. So that's kind of what we're dealing with, walking in that fine line, as I keep saying, with parking and traffic enforcement.
Chief, have you, the increase in the speed limit on Pine Street, have you seen any noticeable difference along Pine Street? Is that extra 5 miles an hour?
No, I don't, what I've seen is we're not getting the road rage complaints as much.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that quite.
We're not getting the road rage complaints, or people passing complaints, like vehicles passing over double solid yellow line.
Thank you.
I had a question, I guess it's only indirectly related to the speeding, but have we engaged our school resource officer in this conversation? And I say that because some of the speeding that I see is actually, on Pine Street, is actually it's a group of young men, the same group, on electric scooters and bicycles, and I actually saw them ride an electric scooter on the yellow line headed towards town.
Unfortunately, electric scooters have become a problem, not just in Manchester, but
Right.
statewide. She's in those conversations all the time. Matter of fact, we were just talking about it with her today, so.
Okay, great. I personally, I'd appreciate it if we could just make her aware that there's just is a real dangerous situation there, and I don't want to witness it.
In the summertime, she's one of my primary enforcement
That's
officers.
awesome. That's great. That's great.
And my point I was gonna state before about the verbal warnings, when that came up, There's been a little bit of a change over the last, year and a half, where now if we give a written warning, even though there's no money fund involved, it still goes onto your driver's record. And 3 of those to the state will suspend your license, so it's not like they're getting a free pass, that does count towards punitive action in the future.
I think, and we talked about this, Chief, before, I think it would be really helpful for you to publish the regular metrics. I loved your article in the Cricket, but I think the residents need to see your metrics as opposed to the filtered information they see in,
I agree, and,
you know,
I'm
tell
gonna be
your
doing that
story.
every month, so. we'll-
Yep. Excellent.
And I also just want to say that with hearing people come in, interviewing Bike Ped, and discussing topics that have been discussed many, many times, there is an element of frustration to explaining, re-explaining, and that's, I think, what we have to figure out how to best address, is to somehow explain that this is not a new topic. This is not a new discussion. This is something that has been discussed over and over and over, and will continue to be discussed. So, I mean, in terms of concerns of children walking to school.
That's, oh,
I'm sorry, Ann?
Becky, do the new pedestrian, initiated lights at the intersection of Pleasanton School and Pleasanton Pine, they seem like a new answer and something that we ought to promote and make sure that
Absolutely,
everybody
absolutely. And that's
understands
really where
their
I'm
safety.
trying to go with this, is that you know, just we are trying to come up with ideas and solutions, and
Communicating our improvements, I think, is what you're getting at.
Thank you.
Right?
Yes.
And I think the chief's article this week was a great first step.
Right.
Because part of the residents' reaction, I believe, is they're only getting a piece of the story.
Yeah.
And he's, you know, Chief Fitzgerald's gonna fill in that gap, and that's gonna be great. The other piece of it is, you know, there is data showing that since the pandemic, people are driving more aggressively, and I think the data shows that we have a problem. So we're gonna do something at, you know, School and Pleasant and Pine and Pleasant, and we'll see how that works. We're gonna keep improving, and I think it's important for the ideas to keep coming forward. I think I'll just take this opportunity to mention that Bike and Ped, they're gonna probably come before the select board in September to request an evening out of the speed limits along Route 127. They want to submit an application to the state because there's too many bumps, too many changes, too much variability. And it's hard for you to enforce the speed limit when there's that much variability. So they're going to come before us in September and make a formal request for that application to go before the state.
Thank you, Kathy, for helping me make that clear, or making it clear.
Don't look to me for help.
You use the word frustration.
John,
and I can
do you
just
have
let know
anything
that we feel that as well. I mean,
No,
we
I
enforce
think
it as best as we can.
I think it's been covered. I mean, my question about the Pine Street study, I'm quite interested in that, and how people's habits change or don't change based upon what's posted out there. But I think that the chief's article, and this is gonna be a series that will be, what, monthly?
I'll
I
do it
think, Chief?
once a month, yeah. We'll pick a topic
This
and
is-
do it once a month, yeah.
This is great. I've already had a couple of people approach me and say, hey, they mentioned that article in particular, so they're paying attention.
Is there anything in particular that can be done about, to revert to Beach Street? Beach Street is 20 miles an hour, and the road is clearly designed for more is there anything that the police or the DPW could suggest as a way of calming traffic on that road?
Well, I know one of the things that I've seen the design on, and I don't know, Greg, if you've seen it, but like the intersection by Captain Dusty's, the
Do the
raised,
raised intersection.
the raised intersections and the raised crosswalks, that was on, I think is it the downtown improvement?
Yes,
Yes.
okay.
It is, yeah. So that was one of them that I thought, that especially the one in front of Captain Dusty's was an excellent design.
So also in line with that, though, some of the locations where we may want to do that, they don't actually physically have to be raised. It could be a 3D
3D, yeah.
renditioning, so that make the plowing easier, but you think it's raised and you slow down.
And just because it is such a wide road, it just, I think, for example, looking at School Street and where School Street, when it was paved, looked so much larger prior to the lining on it. And maybe, I know that that's next discussion is parking on Beach Street, but whether we do parking or not, if we can even, if we don't do parking, can we create bike lanes? Something that visually narrows the road?
Matches the speed limit's got to match what people visually see.
Right,
and
right.
Then they'll naturally slow down, so whatever will work, hopefully. It incentivizes them.
Yeah.
Can we move on to the question of parking between Tappan and Old Neck Road on Beach Street? And I'm going to introduce this by saying that Greg has reminded me that we had parking there and that there was a citizen's petition to remove it, which was approved by the town meeting. Fairly recent, within the past 7 or 10 years for sure. And I'm not sure, I think having the select board come out against a citizen's petition is probably not going to make us any more popular. But I'm willing to hear any opinion.
Well, that was 7 or 8 years ago.
Right.
All right. I'm a fan of exploring added parking down Beach Street. It does two things. It adds parking. It does become a traffic calming situation along Beach Street. We're all talking about we need parking, but we have a town asset, Beach Street itself, that can allow up to 30, 35 cars. I would also advocate, if we do that, is eliminating 1 or 2 spots at the entrance to Harvest Point and putting a crosswalk there. There's a lot of people that are getting off the train during this high, season and just meandering across the street. So I think that we can do 3 things. We can add parking, we can create safety. 2 things, because we create safety with the narrowing of Beach Street by the traffic calming situation. And I'm a big advocate of this.
What was the rationale for the removal of the parking?
Partly aesthetics. People didn't like the look of the parked cars and blocking the view of the harbor when you were driving.
Okay.
Historically, there was a feeling, sort of a myth in town, but nonetheless a general perception that there had been an agreement that there would not be parking as part of the town acquiring the parking up at Singing Beach. But it turned
An
out
urban legend?
that was, well, I think there probably
Sorry,
was
it's
some.
not urban legend, town legend?
Town legend. I think there was some verbal promises perhaps made, but nothing legally
Okay,
binding was made that we ever found.
so
in the
the
research.
aesthetics was the big reason?
And safety.
So that's what I'm trying to understand,
and-
safety?
Safety, however, when we had the parking committee back then, we went out and actually measured the road, and that section of road is wider, only by a few inches than down in front of the 40 Beach Street complex. I don't know if you passed along the memo that Chief Conley sent back in 2017, so he sent me out to do some, get some data in regards to the safety aspects of it, and we reviewed all the calls, and there was no correlation between parking and accidents.
I was wondering if, since we removed the parking, has the speeding gotten worse, or, because now the road's wider visually. I wonder if we had a negative, unintended negative side effect from removing the parking.
I just don't think that there's enough data. There's only 2 years of parking down Beach Street.
It's either 1 or 2, I
1 or
can't.
2,
I have to
So
look
I
at it.
don't think there's enough
Not
data.
very long.
Yeah.
People are, one of the arguments at the town meeting was, people parking and opening up their doors and getting the kids out and the beach gear out, creating a potential conflict with cars driving up and down, but,
That's gonna happen anywhere up and down Beach Street.
right, and I think it's more of a traffic calming impact than it is a safety concern, but that's my opinion.
Did the, any of the parking studies that we looked at recently, did they mention expanding parking further down Beach Street?
Yeah, they did mention that that's an opportunity
It's an
to
opportunity.
add more relatively easily. But it takes a political will to do that. So,
Alright. But the conclusion of that study was that we had a parking management problem, not a parking problem, correct?
Correct.
correct. We have a parking problem a handful of weekends a year.
Okay, and I wouldn't argue that, but is this an initiative that's come up because people think that there is a need for more parking? Why is this coming up now then? Or being revisited, I should say.
Brian,
Well,
Brian, I think you were the one who encouraged it to be revisited.
yes.
Yes.
Well, what the impetus for this was actually a request for the crosswalk at Harper's Point. And
Yeah.
I spoke with Chuck about this, and we all realized that we can't afford to lose parking. So then I started thinking more about, I understand, people say that we have a parking enforcement issue. I think we have we wouldn't have an enforcement issue if we had enough parking. And I think that I know that there was an email was sent to the board about acquiring or leasing spots over at Harper's Point. All right, so why are we gonna spend money for municipal parking when we have enough street to take care of that? So, and then also the concept of and we've been talking about this for a year now as far as traffic calming. Specifically, we're talking about Pine Street, but cars parked along the side of the street are going to be a traffic calming by nature. It's a de facto traffic calming situation. So I think that to me, it becomes a common sense approach to a lot of problems. And that's why I'm advocating for this.
Mhm.
So I just want to mention, tomorrow I have 2 meetings with Pass Point and parking, McKay Meters in regards to kiosk parking. So I'm going to ask both of them to come to one of your meetings and do a presentation at some point. So that's another option in regards to our parking enforcement.
And just one more thing, we're not doing this to raise revenue, obviously, but it becomes
Doesn't hurt.
it's an ancillary, I think the study, right, I think.
I don't want to get into a discussion of kiosk parking tonight. If we're going to discuss it, we need to see the presentation. This is, so yes.
To that
Chief,
point,
I
excuse me, Ann, to
encourage you
that
to
point,
bring
we were
forward
talking
people.
about just the tickets themselves, just not even talking about, my point is that Chief Connolly put together his presentation back in 2017. And again, it wasn't specific between Old Neck and Tappan, but revenues for twice as much, just for during parking enforcement, which would take care of a lot of the town's parking enforcement issues if we could afford to pay them.
So back on the Beach Street parking though, just for a second, because we're not talking kiosks tonight.
No, I didn't say kiosks, I'm talking
okay.
parking tickets. I'm
Okay,
talking
parking
actual parking tickets.
Back on the Beach Street parking topic, I'm struggling to remember the downtown improvement plan graphics that were shared with us. Because you mentioned a concern about the Harbor Point crosswalk, figuring out a better pedestrian situation. Was there anything mentioned in their plan? Because what I'm trying to do is, we're trying to potentially brainstorm solutions, and we have some committees that we could ask to go look at this specific situation and ask them to come back to us with a recommendation rather than us brainstorming solutions. So as the liaison to both Bike and Ped and downtown improvement, I'm happy to take that action. If there's a specific scenario you want me to ask them to go work for us, is it a crosswalk at Harbor Point and parking, just, what is it you want them to look at, and I'll ask them to go look at it for us.
I think a crosswalk at Harbor Point, because there is no sidewalk on the north side of Beach Street. So you're either walking on the grass, or you crossing where there is no crosswalk. So yes, take to both of those the question of how to put in a safe crosswalk and how many parking places we're likely to lose.
Okay. And what to do about the loss of parking.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, I will
We-
take that.
If Kathleen has come out against brainstorming, I suggest that we move on to the next topic, which is the Ocean Street Public Forum date. And I am uncomfortable with relying on Town Green to provide us the full scientific information that we
Thank you,
need
Chief. Thank you, Sergeant.
Thank you very much.
to make a decision about Ocean
No,
Street.
yeah. Yep, but I think they might be able to contribute an introductory commentary.
I'm sorry, it's a little. I would like to see their commentary before we introduce it to the residents.
Yep,
I think we have, haven't we? Seen resident commentary, is that what I missed what you said,
I
Ann.
think she was asking Town Green, the organization.
Oh,
that just-
all right, I see,
yeah,
Is that what you said, Ann?
okay.
yeah.
I'm sorry. Street.
Yeah,
and
I
come
would
back
agree
with a
with
general
that.
commentary.
So we have heard from residents that they're concerned about the condition of the road. We don't have any current plans to do any major upgrades of that road. To develop a plan, you really need a full, beyond Band-Aid, you need a full engineering study. And I think there's been some reluctance to do that in recent years because of the concern that of the likelihood of that road and those improvements being sort of null and void in the first storm. So that creates frustration for the residents because they don't feel like they're getting attention and improvement to a road that is slowly degrading, no question. So the bottom line question, what's the game plan, right? What do we want to do here?
Or what are the options?
Right,
Right.
right.
If
So-
I may, we can apply for grants to get engineering studies. What happened the last time, I believe, is that the impression that the residents got was that it was an engineering study with the goal of eliminating a section of Ocean Street, cutting it into two pieces. And they objected strenuously to that as a goal and ended up giving back the grant. My hope in having a forum or a discussion with them is to explain to them that this is not a problem that we're going to be able to solve in a major way without an engineering study. And that we are not going into the study with any foregone conclusions. That's what I want to convey to the residents, that we can't do major repairs without good engineering. And if they won't let us do good engineering, then we can't fix their roof.
Craig, Ann, can I comment here?
Yes, please.
Yeah, is kind of the format of this discussion, is the DPW gonna take a role here in terms of, you know, it could be A, B, C, or D, but I agree that some sort of a study needs to be done to know what makes the most sense.
Well, yes, I mean, certainly DPW needs to be and will be involved at any discussion that you want to have. They don't have any current set of options to present to you.
Well, I'm just wondering how the format goes. In other words, how is that? What is that discussion fashioned around? Seems to me, you've got to have some possibilities, and they'd be strictly possibilities, because until an engineering study is done, you can't comment on what's real and what's not real.
Yes, I agree. I'm hoping to hear a little bit more from the board here tonight, what you would hope to get out of a forum, and what information might be helpful either pre or post such a forum.
That's what I was just gonna ask, Ann, is what is, what is our goal of the forum? Are we better off crafting and sending a letter to the residents of Ocean Street? And, I mean, what is it we want?
My goal is not to have to give back another grant.
Right.
And I think talking to people is more effective than sending them a letter.
Yeah, but can we talk to them from an informed perspective? In other words, there has to be somebody that has some factual information that can be conveyed.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, and this all kind of precedes me. It's this grant was sent back, I think, because the people did not want to hear what the possibilities might be because they were worried about them. Something like that.
I was on the board at the time, and what happened there was, I think, a perception that there would be a foregone conclusion, and which was incorrect. There was no foregone conclusion. It was simply exploration of options through the grant.
But one of the options was specifically the possibility of not maintaining it as a through road. And I think that's what derailed that effort, because there was quite an outcry against that option.
But that's what that was an option, and they didn't even want to see that in black and white.
That's
Don't
true.
ask a question if you don't want to get the answer.
Right, and
they didn't want to see that as one of the possible answers at all. Not that it was a probable one or anything, but
it was simply would have potentially been an option that would be presented, and that was to allow that aspect of Ocean Street to become a barrier beach as it had been, and which it continues to want to be, given the frequency with which that road has to be repaired. That's why I'm concerned about a forum. I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
I agree. I think we need to have a forum. I'm not sure, to John's point, whether we're ready yet.
Yeah.
Because one, what are the options? If investing a lot of money in one area of town repeatedly might not be in the best area of best interest of the town, is an option to make it a private road. I'm just completely throwing stuff out there without any knowledge whatsoever, so don't even take that as a serious, but I'm just saying, and one option might be, let it go back to its natural state. One option might be let the people take it on as a private entity. I mean, I don't no idea what all the options are, but I would certainly be interested in having an understanding of what those options are before we hold a forum. I just would be really uncomfortable.
Right, so we could spend a little bit of money, it wouldn't be big money, to get at least some high-level synopsis of what the range of options might be.
Range of options.
I think Chuck could work with, one of the engineers that he often works with, and they could probably they could sketch out, in broad brush terms, what those options might be.
Yeah.
And that could be the
Could we
basis,
ask Chuck?
that could be the basis
Could we
then
ask Chuck?
for a forum.
Okay,
Right.
I would be.
I just think
Could we
it's a
ask
little
Chuck to have that
premature.
prepared for January?
I'm sorry, Ann, what was that?
Could we ask Chuck to have something together for the second meeting in January?
Yeah, that's very doable.
I know that the residents are concerned because their water and electricity both come down under that street. And having it revert to nature might threaten their utilities. And
Well, it's also, I think, concerns of access, because the other road is much narrower and has, while it's more protected, it is narrow. So I know that there are a lot of different concerns, but I think if we could have DPW give us some information before going out and talking to people, they'd be better served.
Just a question of the history here. I guess the engineering study or whatever was going to be done was a much more detailed thing that was declined. The grant that was supposed to support that was going to be pretty detailed.
Yes.
Or we,
Yes.
okay, all right. Yeah, and I agree. We don't need that kind of detail at this point. That's not to say that that's not the next step after this, but I agree that we have to have some sort of talking points basis for a forum here. Right now, we're sitting here looking at history and concerns from several residents about the future of that area, but we don't have a specific agenda.
are there any more comments from the board before I recognize Jack, who has his hand up? Jack, please unmute and give us your name.
Good evening, Jack Burke. Yep, Jack Burke, 16 Ocean Street. From a little bit of history, I recall that I was contacted by a few neighbors who were concerned about the grant. It was specifically brought forward, I believe, by the Conservation Commission with the specific goal to abandon Ocean Street. And that's why I think most of the neighbors got very concerned. So I think if you're going to move forward, you're going to need to have options to either repair or abandon and what the ramifications would be for any of those options. But specifically, it was conservation that wanted to see that study done to let it become a sandbar again, and that was it.
Okay,
Thank you.
yep,
Seems that we have different people have different recollections of how that happened, but that's why I'm pushing to have more openness about what's going on so that we can at least agree on what we disagree about.
Right, so,
Okay, so I think we can set a forum date for sometime in mid-January. Chuck will pull together information, if Town Green would like to take a look and tell us what they're going to say before we say it in public.
mhm.
Who's that? Sorry, I just kicked my dog. And have we hashed this one over enough?
Mhm.
Yep.
Okay. Liaison updates. Becky?
I'm going to ask Debbie if I could get an updated list of liaisons, because I need one, please.
It's good enough reason. Parks and Rec, nothing new to report. Still waiting, I guess we're still waiting on USA Pickleball.
yeah, I was gonna give a quick
Okay,
update.
so I'll let Greg speak to that. And beyond that, nothing.
I already mentioned on Bike and Ped, they're coming before the select board on, we believe, September 17th or 18th, whatever that meeting is, to review an application to change the speed limits on the State Route 127. Downtown Improvement Committee, they worked with our town staff to update the parking information on the town website, I think as they previously mentioned, and now they're working to print some collateral with a QR code with the intent of distributing that to local businesses. So basically make it easy for visitors to access parking information. So they're kind of working on how best to communicate that information. Greg, are you gonna talk about the FinCom meeting as part of your?
Go ahead.
Okay.
That's fine.
Well, at the last FinCom meeting, they voted to reduce the target for the reserve to 8%, but to include the school budget. And the other big discussion was doing capital planning a little bit differently this year. So they're gonna take a look at all the capital needs up front, I believe, targeting completion of capital planning by October, and then work on the expense. So, which I was thrilled to hear that based on the, the big capital needs we have. It's really a common practice to talk about capital all at once and then go into your expense budget. So I think they're really doing great work, and we'll hear more from them.
Will they be bringing, if I may, Ann, I have a question for Kathy.
Of course.
Will the FinCom be bringing their desire to change?
Yes.
Okay, just because,
They should be bringing that to advising the select board.
okay,
Yes,
thank
yes,
you.
they
I
should be
just-
advising the select board, absolutely.
Thank
They
you.
didn't set a time for that, though, at the last meeting, Greg, I don't recall.
Yeah, they did not, you're right.
Okay.
So,
We can talk about that.
yeah,
with them
we
this-
get the next one,
this
yeah.
Wednesday.
Thank you.
I can comment, and I guess DPW and water. I think all of us, I think, got the top 9 questions that were in our water bills this past week. The frequently asked questions with regard to water in Manchester, And in fact, the website contains an additional 15 or 16 frequently asked questions that supplement that document. And Chuck has finalized his list for the pilot study of these new smart meters. And I think he's going to be working on that next week, starting to put those meters in with the 25 people that have been selected. And that's it.
Thank you. Okay. There is the school, I missed the school committee, or I'm about to miss the school committee meeting, and there will be more about that, soon. So can we move on to the consent agenda? The first item is the approval of minutes from July 17th. Has everyone read them?
I need
Is there a motion
to, I just made a spill. I would like to take the minutes out of the consent agenda because I have to, not vote on those.
Recuse yourself.
Yep.
Right.
So if we
Okay,
could,
so let's take the rest of it. The election officer appointments, the reappointment of the town accountant and town clerk, and the touch a truck. Is there any discussion on any of those three?
not for me.
Is there a motion to approve? Is there a motion to approve those three
So
items?
moved.
Second,
Further discussion? Roll call vote. Becky?
Yes?
Brian?
Yes.
Kathy?
yes,
My internet is very unstable. Kathy is yes. John?
Is yes.
And I say yes. Moving to the approval of minutes, is there a motion to approve the minutes of July 17th?
so moved,
Second.
Second, okay.
Becky?
Abstain?
Abstain. Brian?
Yes. Yes.
Kathy?
yes,
John?
Yes.
And I say yes. Okay, town administrators report.
All right, I'll try to run through these fairly quickly. Pickleball update, we were hoping to have more details by this evening. We're still waiting for some additional information from the sound barrier manufacturer. The barriers that are going to be installed in Beverly have not been installed yet, so we're anxious for that to happen. That'll be a close example that we can go visit and witness firsthand. US Pickleball Association, as Brian was mentioning, they had hoped to come last week. They've been delayed, but they hope to come either this week or next to take some sound measurements and to bring some sample barriers and test those out a bit. So I'm moving a little slower than hoped, but things are progressing, and we certainly hope to have more details for you at your September 5 meeting. So,
Right. We got email from one of the households that's bothered by them, asking for the names of people. Is that something that Cheryl or someone could quickly respond to?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the, ask for what now?
Someone is asking for the specific names of individuals from the pickleball establishment. I can forward you the message again.
Sure,
It's
yeah, I can work with
one of
Cheryl. yeah, happy to work with Cheryl on that. So that's item one.
Okay, Cheryl, I know was on that list. If you just straightforward questions, it's nice if people could get answers even if you can't, it's hard to see what the practical implication is.
Okay, all right. Item two, as the MBTA zoning, and as we heard earlier this evening, the whole issue of climate resiliency, I think those two topics, there are others, but those two in particular, I think warrant concerted outreach to the public, engagement of the residents, and I know that the task force, the MBTA task force, will be moving forward with hiring of a consultant to help with the technical aspects of their work. That person or firm likely could help with outreach. There are other organizations out there that could help us with outreach. So I just don't want us to lose sight of the need for that. I think it'll be very important and critical as the fall advances here, that we think seriously about what that outreach plan is. I know that the task force has asked Tiffany to craft a plan, just an outline of a plan that we might want to pursue. So I think once we work on those and put together more specific game plan, it'd be important to support it and get your input on it as well. So I think I just want to highlight that as a need, and then I hope that we can have a more detailed discussion on it next month. Kathy talked about the FinCom. I can skip over that. A flagpole on the common. You've been talking about the possibility of a second pole. We've talked about a telescoping pole next to the fountain, near the benches at the fountain. Turns out that pole doesn't drop down as far as we initially thought. It'll stand about 6.5 feet tall when it's collapsed. I thought it was more in the 3, about half of that, but it is movable. It's a bit of an effort, but you can take it in and out so that there'd be nothing there. Just the hole, you put a cap over the hole that it goes in. So if that's something that you're interested in, we can certainly continue to pursue it. So at some point, we need you to make a decision on that. And if you're ready for that decision at your next meeting, we can tee that up.
And we're talking about doing a flagpole when we've only had one request for a flag?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that needs to be part of the discussion.
Yes.
That's correct, yeah.
So if you're ready, I'll put that on the agenda for next time, and we can have that discussion.
Okay.
All right.
Just meetings coming up. Your next regular meeting will be the Tuesday, the day after Labor Day, so September 9. And then we have scheduled
September 5.
I'm sorry.
September
5.
We got
9/5,
you. We got
but
you.
yes, you got it. Thank you. The Rotunda Forum is scheduled for Thursday, 9/14. We'll do that at 7 p.m. It is the open house at the school that evening. I believe that starts at 6. So people who want to do both, if they go to the open house earlier, they can still scoot over here for the Rotunda discussion. We will have the visual simulations for that evening, and we'll get those out ahead of time as well.
And those will be on the website so
Yes.
people can.
Yep, exactly. And then lastly, I'll be away next week.
Yay, love to.
And yeah.
Congratulations.
Yes.
Good.
So that's what I wanted to go over. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay. As far as I can tell, we've covered all of the topics. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion? Thank you. Ready to vote? Becky?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Brian, adjourn?
Yes.
Sorry. Kathy?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
I say yes. Thank you all very much for putting up with me and my dog and my
Fair winds and following
Oh.
seas, Ann.
Yes.
internet.
It went